Okay, I'm hot. So, we're going to try something this morning. So if I told you I didn't prepare anything to talk about, so instead, I'm wondering if most of us haven't at one time or another done this. Like, okay, I need something, God. I need anything. So flip and then point. And I found Amaziah was 25 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem 29 years. He did what was right in the eyes of the Lord, but not wholeheartedly. Okay, how does that apply to my life? How does that apply to your guys' life? Okay, not so much. Let's try again. That's the contents. Okay, try again. Proverbs, blessings crown the head of the righteous, but violence overwhelms the mouth of the wicked. Okay, we can use that. You could do this over and over again, and I remember as a kid very clearly being like, okay, let's see what you got for me today, and just pointing your finger and saying, whoa. And then sometimes if you put your finger in the right place in the Old Testament, you might, what did it just say? And you might be a little surprised by what you'd find in the Bible. And so I would like to know and ask you guys a question. I'm not really going to speak by pointing and finding a verse this morning, but ask you guys a question about how do you view this book? And you've gotten a little bit of an insight because you heard, if you're listening to the children's sermon, but how do you really view the Bible? And that's rhetorical. I'd like you to think about it. But also, I would like to hear a few answers regarding this. How does the world view this book? How does the world view this book, or book of books? And why is it that this, words on a page, is banned in multiple parts of this world? Why is it that this, words on a page, has gotten people killed? Not only killed, but tortured, burned alive. Why would words on a page do that? How does the world see this book? And I would love to hear a few thoughts on what you guys think the world sees about the Bible. Judgmental. Don't do this, don't do that, and you don't judge me. Don't tell me how to live my life. Yeah. Anything else?
Don't you think that people fall into two categories? Either if you're a believer, you love the Bible, you treasure it, you value it. And on the other hand, many people fear it so that they will kill, they will destroy to try to rid the world of it. And it's never happened.
So,
it's been tried over and over.
right.
So you either fear it and hate it, or you love it and treat it with respect.
Right. So there's two ends of the spectrum.
And they're diametrically.
So fear and hate on the one hand, said I would really just like to eliminate. And then on the other hand, an adoration, a love, to the point of death, where you'd love it so much you would give your life. Yes, very, very isolated ends of the spectrum. Arletta?
I think there's, in the United States at least, there are a lot of people who look at it like some kind of a good luck charm that they put on their shelf to show that they have some kind of connection to God, but they don't really
it's a good luck charm.
into it and try to get a deeper understanding of what it says.
It's a less fuzzy version of a rabbit's foot in a lot of ways. Yeah. I remember when I was in college, it was my sophomore year, and we got ready to move in to our first house. Like, we lived in the dorms our freshman year in Maryville. We're getting ready to move in our first house, and a couple of the roommates moved in during the summer before. A lot of us were out doing other stuff in the summer, but we went and visited a couple times during the summer, like, oh, the new place is so exciting. And it was a a bunch of Christian guys, and we walk in, and the couple guys had moved in. It was a big house. It barely had anything. But we walk in, and there were probably, throughout the house, like 9 Bibles just laying and scattered throughout. And there are 2 guys, 9 Bibles, and we're like, are you guys really that depraved that you 9 Bibles sitting around here? That's crazy. And just how, and to Arletta's point, like we have it often sitting, and I'm not saying about those guys that they were using it as a lucky charm, but just how it is so ubiquitous, meaning the Bible's everywhere in our culture. You go to a hotel room, and the Bibles are there, next to the Book of Mormon a lot of times, but the Bibles are there. And every hotel room in America, probably with some exceptions, but that's kind of crazy, that this is the best seller of all time, like no book touches it or comes near it, and that people are both willing to die and to kill. It's just really crazy. So any other thoughts on how the world views this book? Besides judgmental, isolating, bringing out the most emotion. Any other thoughts? Well, I am guilty of spending most of my life not understanding the Bible. I'm also guilty of reading Genesis about 18 different times. As a kid, said, I'm going to read through it all. And then make it through a number of chapters in Genesis and inevitably back on the shelf. Again, I'm going to read through it all. And Genesis, back on the shelf. It's like, man, we know Genesis really well. Because I'm sure I'm not alone in doing that. And guilty of, like I said, flipping through it, picking a verse, saying, okay, what does God have for me? It's been a while since I've done that, but I did that as a kid. Also guilty of taking it completely out of context. Of saying, I know of something that I think is right or that I want. It'd be really nice to find some backing here. And I remember I was proud of being a Christian when I was in high school, although I didn't even understood what that really meant to live life that way. But I was proud. I'm a Christian. People know me as a Christian. And so I loved every chance to slip in a Bible verse into a project or, on my locker or something like that, and just have one and I'd paste it, somewhere or slip it in there because it kind of related to whatever point I was trying to prove. And most people would have looked at that and said, hey, good work, you're proud of your faith, good job. It was like, in retrospect, I was taking that verse completely out of context. One of my favorite verses, and one of our favorite verses here at Fillmore Christian, we have it on our t-shirts, Romans 8:28. For God works for the good, for all those called according to His purpose, and all those who love Him. He can work all things for good. And that's true, that's truth. But I've often used that to justify things that I knew weren't good in my own life, and justify my own sin. All that point is to say, this book is absolutely powerful. And if used incorrectly, it can be powerfully destructive. But if used the way I believe, and as the elders believe, this church, used the way God intended it, this could be the power of eternity, the power of life, the power of ultimately the truth. So I have a couple of videos this morning to hopefully give some context to how we treat this book and what it's all about and why this book. And to be clear, not so much the book itself. This book has been presented in multiple different ways. But what's really important is not the words on the page, but the truth in the words and the meaning behind what's going on here. So why? Why these ideas? And a guy, he speaks really fast, so just be ready for that. His name's Jeff Bethke. He's probably my age, but he makes a bunch of videos, and oftentimes they're really powerful. This one, I don't say it's absolutely right, but it gives a good framework for how do people view the Bible? He does a much better job than I could. So we're going to
about this. This is my Bible. I've had this particular one for a couple years, and I want to ask, how do you see this? What's the lens in which you see the Bible through? I would say that the answer to that question affects everything. The answer to that question affects how you see God, how you see yourself, how you see the world, and if there's problems arising in your life, or you're struggling, or there's things going on, I would argue a lot of times that arises, at least in my own life, from seeing a distorted or a false narrative that God does not reveal. So I want to talk to you about kind of a few different wrong ways that a lot of us see the Bible, and then one that I think that'll kind of make the Bible explode and blow up in a good, beautiful, amazing narrative way. Now first, let me just make clear, when I say distorted narrative, what distorted means is that it has an element of truth, but ultimately when you stretch that out to the whole thing, it makes it look ugly and weird. In the same way when you go to clown mirrors, it's distorted. It shows you, but it's weird and it's off and it doesn't make sense. Now the three columns I want to go through is kind of how do you see the Bible, how do you see God, and then how do you see yourself? I think those three go hand in hand and kind of fall like dominoes all together. Now the first false narrative that we see the Bible primarily as is as a sword or a weapon. Now the Bible actually says once that the Bible is a sword and it cuts and it divides, and that's beautifully true. But when you elevate that to the ultimate, like we already said, that's when it becomes problematic, because when you elevate the Bible to sword, that makes God actually a military general or someone who's all about invoking violence on others. And then when you think about that, when you see God like that, then you actually see yourself as a soldier in his army. And that's when it becomes really problematic. You can spot these people who see the Bible and God and themselves like this because they're usually on a street corner yelling at people. They're usually the people picketing and protesting and hating on everyone. The second way to see the Bible is a rule book. Now, does the Bible have rules in it? Yes and amen. But when you make it ultimately a rule book that you go to look up legal code as if God's a lawyer, right? Then that turns God into a cop or a police officer. God is nothing more than someone who's looking for people who's breaking the rules. Then what does that make you? That makes you someone who wants to escape punishment. It makes you a prisoner. It makes you not like God because you think you have to run away from him. Now, sadly, that sounds a lot more like Zeus, does it not? Who just wants to throw lightning bolts down on you. Another popular one in American evangelicalism was in the Bible is a roadmap to life. I heard that a ton growing up. Now again, that has an element of truth, but I think it's problematic for a few reasons. Now one, if the Bible is ultimately a roadmap to life, meaning where do I go to college, who do I date, you'll get seriously frustrated when you go to the Bible like that. That makes God kind of like an eternal Santa Claus, right? God is nothing more than this old guy with a white beard who has a naughty and nice list, and his whole job is to give you exactly what you ask for. And then so if the Bible's a roadmap to life, God's Santa, then ultimately you're the center of the universe. God exists simply to give you exactly what you want. Now the last and the correct way to see the Bible, I think, is to see it as narrative. If you see the Bible as a story, then that makes God the author of life. That makes God the author and the creator of everything. That makes God the grand storyteller, which is beautiful. And then if that's God, then that makes us a part in his grand narrative and play, but not the main part. Jesus is. So think about how that balance works, where you are important, you are unique, you are beautiful, and you have a job to do, but we're not the center of the universe. Our job is to look and put the spotlight on the main character, who is Jesus, who died and resurrected and brought this new world in the resurrection.
So how do you view it? What is your perspective? Because I would agree with Jeff that this is meant to be a story. That the Bible, if taken in its entirety, lays out one of the greatest adventures that is still at work today, of which you are I'm not very good with the drama terms, but you're one of the main characters. You're not the main character, as he said. The main character through it all is God working, particularly through his son, Jesus. So how do you view it, though? Because I know I have spent time in all three of those first three camps without seeing the big picture. But I also know that once I actually got a glimpse of the big picture, of the story of which I was a part, my life changed. That I spent so many years treating it as a rule book that it was exhausting. I was like, oh, this is dreadful. And I really didn't know what the future held. But I was like, it looks pretty tiresome. And I guess I just will look forward to getting to heaven and just bear my burden while I'm here on earth. But does that make sense? Does that seem characteristic of God at all? The God of love and hope It doesn't. Not to me. And so once this story started to unwind before me, life became so much more. And I think others in this church would testify to that. So that's why I was thankful, Ken, as we were embarking on this journey as elders, to say, okay, we need to fill the role of a paid pastor to speak every Sunday, which takes quite a bit of work. Andy and Ken will testify to say, okay, we want to prepare to have something of value to teach about the truth. So we're like, well, how can we, what does our church need? What are the needs of all of us? And how can we help us give that to you? And that's when Ken had heard about the story and said, hey, how about this to Andy and I? And we started to unwind it. We said, that sounds really good. Because if there's one thing I think that a lot of us would claim we are weak in, it may not be reading the Bible, although it very well likely is for most of us, spending consistent time reading the Word of God, but it's also reading the entire Bible. Because it seems daunting to think about, I need to read that whole book, especially when I know there's those sections that are just cubits of length of the temple and the tabernacle, and there's all those begats of this person begat that person. Like, that doesn't sound all that enjoyable. But what if we put that all in the context of the greatest love story ever told, of which you are a main character? That sounds exciting. And that sounds like it has a potential to change our lives. So I'm in. Andy's in. Ken's in. We're asking you, are you in? And again, if you don't listen to me, listen to a cool video that has music to it. Story is the name of this series. It's by a couple of pastors, Max Lucado and Randy Frazee, who pastor a church in Texas. And what they've done is they've taken the New International Version, and they have, to uphold as much of the integrity of the truth of the words in the Bible, they've taken those words of the Bible that contains chapters and verse, and they've put it in a version that reads like a story. It has 31 chapters in it. The point is, the Bible in its current form, with its chapters and verses and all of its truth, we know many times will turn people away. Like, oh, it's the Bible. They already have their mind made up about it. And so you approach it in a context that's just not very healthy. So instead, what if you opened a book with a wonderful story that says, this is the truth in here. But instead, it's going to keep me engaged and connected. Because one, it reads more like a story. But number two, we're going to do this together. We're going to do it as a family. And hopefully not only us, but other people we care about too, who says, you know what, they have their mind made up about the Bible, but in fact is they've never read it. They don't know what's in it. So what if we find out together what is in this book? What is the truth really about? How can we discover it together? And that really is what I'm after, I know, is the truth. The Bible, the word the Bible, sometimes even that word people treat as holy. It's the Bible. The Bible means the books. In Latin and Greek, biblia, biblio, it means the book. Someone started referring it to as the Bible about 3 centuries after it was compiled and really the canon was put together. So what I treat this as really, like what's the point? The point is truth. What's real? Because what I know about all of our lives is we've hit so many dead ends, so many points where we realize this is a dark road. This is not life-giving. I am not full. I am sad. I am broken. I am depressed. And instead, if we got to the truth, believing that God created you, He created all of this, and He has a plan for you, a plan to prosper you, not to harm you, a plan to give you hope and a future. Do you believe that to be true? Because if you do, how are you figuring out what that plan is? Are you just basing it off what you hear on television commercials? Are you basing it on what you hear from friends? Because what is our standard of getting the truth? Because so many ideas in this world ebb and flow. So many friendships and relationships ebb and flow. They're in, they're out. They change constantly. But if there's one thing we can know as a standard of what is the truth really, the Bible is the only place I know where to get that. I don't have time, or you don't have the desire to sit and listen of why can we believe the Bible to be true. If you have that desire, say, hey, I don't even know if that book is legitimate. Talk to Ken. He's got a great DVD resource, Ken and Joanna do, that lay out to say, hey, if you trust any historical literature at all, then you better trust the Bible, because as far as historically accurate literature, there is no more well-documented book than the truth of these stories, commands that are in this book. So in that, if you are serious about seeking the truth in your life, or you're serious about for any of your family members or your neighbors or people you care about, then you would be hard-pressed to come up with an argument that says there is no better standard for the truth in this world than the Bible. And so we are going to discover that together over the course of, get this, the next 31 weeks. And actually not the next, because we're going to start this series on July the 12th. The reason I'm talking about it today is we're gearing up. The desire is for every family to have a copy of this in their home. And so what we've got today is a whole kit, because that's the beauty, as I showed you earlier. This isn't just an adult thing. As a lot of parents in here, a lot of families, don't you want your kids to have a better, clear view of the Word of God than we had growing up? Some of you was done really well for. I had a distorted view of the Bible. That's not my parents' fault. I think they were doing the best they could. I think it was just tradition, in this country, in evangelical America. But anyway, the design is for this to be brought up at your dinner tables. To be able to say, hey, what I learned when I was sitting in church is the same thing you were learning downstairs, just in a way that allowed you to be a little bit more bouncy about it. As opposed to, I'm making you sit and shut up. We're going to talk about this together. So I'm thrilled, because I know, even as a parent who thinks often about my children's faith, I fail so often to actually do anything about it, which is frustrating, because I say, this is important to me, but why can't I put together a plan that is actually engaging them? And yeah, it's still not going to be perfect, as we're trying to talk about this and they're wanting to hop around, but let's do the best we can, and I think these resources are going to be fantastic. So what I have done on the back table there, I have these little slips of paper that you could put your name on, and I've listed all of the different books that are available, which I'll go through real quickly here. They have the prices of them. I've listed both what the church would order them for you, which is just Amazon pricing, because that's the cheapest available. So, but we can take care of ordering that for you. And all we're saying is, if you can, we suggest you donate the cost of that. You're welcome to get this on your own, any of these resources, but we will take care of having them here and delivering them to you probably on July 5th, or if you aren't going to be there then, maybe the week before, so that we're ready to go together and you have all the resources you need. There are 5 different options, actually more than that, but we're focusing on 5. Number 1 is we highly recommend everybody get a copy of the story. This is the basis for it all. Recommended 1 per family. That's $10.90 for a hardcover book like this. It's $8 if you want to buy it digitally, on Kindle, Google Play Books, something like that. There's also, I think we have 1 teen officially in here. Almost 2 this week, right? Almost 2. There is the same book, which has the same story in it, but it's a teen edition, which comes with, she's like, the main point is it's really cool. It's got this little cartoon on the side that when you flip it goes through. So I don't know if that's attractive to teens or not. It also has a few additional resources that it's paperback, more easy to be thrown in a backpack for a teenager. So that's that. Recommended 1 for every teen family. There's also the story for kids, which I do not have, but it is recommended for ages 9 through 12. And so that is those two books are $9, hardcover $9.69, $9.03, or you can also get them digitally. Although I'd probably recommend a hard copy for the kids because the screen will probably throw them off most times. But you have that option. There's the story for children, so different from the story for kids. This is recommended for ages 4 through 8, which accompanies a big part of our congregation here. And it's the same 31 chapters, but just in a way that will hopefully engage your 4 to 8-year-olds. And then another demographic that we definitely hit, recommended for ages 2 through 5, is the story for little ones. So there might even be some, 5 and 6-year-olds who still like this. 31 chapters. You would be taking it through the same pace that we'd go through with the church. All of these stories together. So the resources are immense. I recommend today, before you leave, fill one of these out if you desire for us to order the books. If not, don't just say, I'll do it, and then not get to it. If you're going to get them, get home, get them ordered. But consider this. We want all of you families to have this, if you don't already, and have whatever resources to fit your family's need. But also, we think this is a tremendous opportunity to get after those who say they have their opinions about who God is and what He has created them for. They haven't made up. Most of them chose no thank you. But one of the bases of how I see the world, and I think to speak for Andy and Ken too, is a lot of those people have their mind made up based on half-truths or even flat-out lies about what they believe God is or who they believe God is. So, is this the chance to ask somebody, like, have you read the Bible? Do you care what God says about your life? Do you want to find out the truth? And this may be an opportunity to say, I'm going to get them a book. I'm going to spend $10 or $12, and I'm going to take them, I'm going to invite them to this series. To be honest, I don't care about the growth of this church for the sake of how many do we have here? What's our budget? Could care less. But for the sake of the people who are struggling in their lives with the darkness of this world, I absolutely hope they come to this. For that reason, I encourage you to think about, who is it that maybe this is a turning point? And as the promoters of the story were saying, they said, this was truly, for some that people had been inviting to church or Bible study or a small group for years, this was the deal. Because they said, even a lot of non-Christians have it on their bucket list to read through the Bible. To say, have you read through the best-selling book in history? Have you read through the most controversial book ever written? They probably haven't. So, that's an encouragement to think about, what opportunity could this present for you and the people you care about? I encourage you not to do it out of saying, ooh, I'm going to get them there. They're going to be with me and people will see that I brought them to church. Do it because you love somebody. Do it because you want them to know the truth. That's why you should do it, and no other reason. Because that's what we're all after, is the truth. And so that's why this morning, in all of this and preparing for a series like this, which again is starting on July the 12th, we may have kind of a precursor on July the 5th. I'm not sure yet. But July the 12th will be starting with chapter 1, creation. So you can know that's coming. It'll go through where we hit Christmas right on with the story. So it'll be beautiful. And we'll finish up in February next year. So to think it's going to be freezing outside before we get to the end of the series is kind of crazy to think about. Before I kind of turn it, Ken or Andy, is there anything you'd like to add before to the expectation of this series?
Just with the orders, we don't want anybody to be put off by the price. If you can't afford, the church will cover.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that includes books as gifts too, because I think there's a big opportunity there. But say if you can, suggest a donation, that's fine. Make sure you get these back to me today if you plan on it. Or if you say, oh, someone else I know, let me know before. I'll be placing it probably on Tuesday. So if you get them back to me today or send me a message if you say, I want to check with another family first, too. Yeah, Sarah, if you'd please. So, we're after the truth. And the reason we get together every week is because it is hard to seek the truth. And as I've talked about before, there are many who don't want you to have the truth. In particular, Satan. And so we need to come together and remind ourselves, why are we doing this? And that's the point of communion, is to remember what the truth is really about. And as we've examined the story, we see the truth found in no one greater than Jesus. That he has filled that role to set us free. And so, set us free from sin. So that's why going from this big word to bringing us to the communion table today. Before we do that, just one more video for you this morning.
This is your story.
This is your story.
This is your story.
This is my story.
This is my story.
This is my story.
But most of all,
this is the greatest story ever told.
This is God's story.
This is God's story.
This is God's story.
I know you're going to enjoy the incredible journey you're about to embark on. The story is brimming over with tales of mystery, intrigue, adventure, of love, heartbreak, and triumph, of power, of struggle, and finally, of redemption. But remember, the Bible is not 100 ancient, unrelated paintings, but a mural all knitted together to tell the story of God's great love for us and the extent to which He will go to get us back. I know you're really going to enjoy and appreciate this wonderful experience as you fully explore how we all fit into the greatest story ever told, God's story.
This is God's story.
This is God's story.
This is God's story.
And God's story culminated on the cross. To say, why would a man willingly give his life as innocent? And as you read the entirety of the story, including the Old Testament, it becomes more and more clear of this is the rescuer. This is the hero we needed, found in Jesus. And if you truly believe in that hero and the impact that he had on your soul to take away your sin, again, it could be life-changing. Okay.